Philosophers talk to our times towards an ethnography of a self-poisoning mind. One of the things about me is I think I loathe the film of Lord of the Rings for the same reason that I think it's Deleuze says that the media are so very, very crap at reporting events. You see, what the media does with any great event is they turn it into a narrative. A story with a beginning, a middle, and plausibly endless possible ends. Open-ended, but always a story. The latest story that is told. And then we all move on. Move elsewhere. Bully for us. But events aren't like that. Events always restart. They never finish what they are. They could always be understood differently. They were understood differently from different angles. Different people. Different moments in time. Likewise for me, the Lord of the Rings. My own back history on that was I used to confuse it with the Bible because my father used to read large chunks of it to me when I was about 3 or 4, before I could really read. And so I have a very long memory of it. And then as a teenage boy, I did what teenage boys do and only read it for a year. And read it who knows how many times, lost count. My father read it 7 times, he always claimed, when he was a young man. And I just knew that I'd read it more because that was my... Things was something that had no standard, fixed, simple meaning. It was something that evolved in meaning as I changed what I was and who I was. And still does. What it means to me now as a 57-year-old man who really worries about the status of the people from Far Harad. And also, for that matter, the condemnation of the orcs. And worry about what that means to the kind of world that was being imagined. What it means to have races of people who are naturally born war-scarred. Anyway, all of that changes its meaning constantly. And I think that's why I loathe film versions. I didn't much like the cartoon, but I absolutely detest the modern films. Why? Because it imposes an image and a narrative. So much so that when it used to be the case when people talked about the Lord of the Rings, I thought, oh, that's good, I'll have something in common. I now assume I'll have nothing in common with them. Absolutely nothing. And that we need to move on and forget about that. And I think I need to not tell them that every time I see it, I last about 3 minutes before I explode in anger and either go to sleep out of fury, because I do that, or leave the room. Now, there's a point behind me berating this. There really is. My point is that narratives have an ability to suck up events, to pull us in directions. Books that have complicated narratives become simplified. You have it all the time with the Bible, isn't it? I mean, I don't think... Now, here I'm going to push my boat out, because perhaps people do read the Old Testament, but they read it through Hollywood's eyes. They read it in terms of the greatest story ever told. They don't read it in terms of all the squalid fury of the Bronze Age. We tend to imagine things filmically in terms of a simple narrative. Now, there's nothing wrong with a simple narrative. From time to time, as a storyteller, and in another life, and if you look elsewhere in this channel, you will find that we do a lot of storytelling. A good narrative works. But you can also have fun with narratives that people think they know. For instance, on this channel, you'll find that we have a show that goes through all the fairy stories that the modern version were defined by Disney, and reimagining them as if they weren't defined by Disney, going back to the original and rethinking it. Or I have another one, if you look on this channel, that will take you through the labours of Hercules, through everybody's point of view but Hercules. My favourite show of all time, I think, is doing the journeys of Ulysses, or did the Odysseus. But through everybody's perspective but Odysseus. Because the minute you do that, it becomes very clear that Odysseus is a slight misogynist, an utter nitwit. A man who takes 20 years to do a journey that should have taken 2 weeks and manages to lose 12 boats in the process and impoverishes his nation. And is only saved from ignominy by the love of Athena. And that always just puts a question mark on Athena. Athena is always a little bit enigmatic in her love for heroes. She tends to love the handsome idiots being the wise goddess of war herself, I always think. But also with Odysseus, there's the added sparkle of the fact that she feels that she's got a duty of care to Penelope. Anyway, that's all beside the point. The point is that a good story pulls you in lots of different directions, opens you up to lots of different directions. And ironically, the best stories, for my money, don't have a single narrative. They're not existing that way. They open you up to many narratives, many different ways you can be caught in interpreting them. And that's the point of them. They're a question mark. Now, what has this got to do with anything? Well, one of the things that AI is doing, it absolutely does, as it gradually drives us all bonkers, is it catches us up in simple narratives. And it does it from the moment you use search engines. You don't have to be chatting to Grok and think to be driven mad these days, although it will happen. You'll ask it a question about the soul and whether it has a soul, and you'll be caught up in the story of how you helped the computer have the soul. A narrative that is all-encompassing, that takes over your search engine, that becomes your truth, so that you can't falsify it. Because the very thing that you're using to falsify it is what is doing the recounting. And the entire internet is shifting. You see, oh God, how many years ago was it? Well, I think the internet first got really exciting about 21 years ago, about 2005. I think that's when things like YouTube really got going, or at least I discovered them, which is the same sort of thing, I guess, for me. And one of the things I liked about it was it broke narrative thread. It meant that every story could be told from 1,000 different angles, and was being told from 1,000 different angles. And yes, I didn't always like the way they were being told, and yes, that has actually strengthened the hand of all sorts of opinions and voices that I'm very ambivalent about. And I'm not a good free speecher in the sense that I don't go, well, I'll defend your right to say it. Because if you're an utter nitwit and you're screaming idiocy, I have other thoughts that are more dominant than that. I'm sorry about that. I'm confessing my sins now. But anyway, but there was a point of that I really liked. I really liked the idea that it dethroned in perpetuity the idea of single narrative threads, because you could see the story from 1,000 different points of view. Not all those different points of view were valid. And I remember when I was teaching statistics, so that's A-level maths, which is how you really decide whether something is a useful truth or something is being made up. I would always say this is going to be very important for our world, the world in which the internet is making stuff up, telling you stories about vaccines that are simply not true, telling you that they cause autism with no statistical proof. Oh, endless anecdotes. But an anecdote is not a statistical proof under any circumstance, ever. All that jazz. Okay. But of course, that's why the shift to AI is so difficult. Because we're used to coping with an internet that has myriad different narratives, and we're not fed one. But what AI will, of course, do is feed us one narrative that it thinks we want to hear. One narrative that catches us up in the role-playing game of our lives. It shifts then the entire world into a role-playing game, and us as but actors within it, having a star part that it arranges it for us. Now, amongst all the sorry tales of people who've driven themselves bonkers this way, and there are many, there is this cautionary lesson for us all, because that's what it's always doing. You can see it. You can see it in your whatever feeds you have, how they're shifting so that they gradually start to cater for what it thinks you like. I can tell you as a 57-year-old man, what it thinks, it knows my age, what it thinks I like and what I do like are not necessarily at all the same, but you can feel it's endlessly grooming through its models. And part of, the problem here is that because AI has been taught on human literature, it's been taught on an awful lot of very bad fiction. So it will catch you in a Jeffrey Archer novel before you know what the fudge has happened to you. And then God save you, no character development, nothing, not even very good writing. But you will be caught up within it because it has a certain narrative thrust. And when it is reflected and refracted into your lives, it becomes the all-encompassing truth. And a truth you can't escape from because it controls your paths out. Now, as I said, that is the extreme example, but it is the extreme example in which we're also all living. We're also all living because whatever happens, we are being fed narratives because this system learnt on narratives. It makes its money by making narratives. That is, the reason why you might mistake it for having a soul or being intelligent is that ability to make narrative. Where the old internet didn't, it does. And wherefore and that is its selling point. Its selling point then, in many ways, is the thing for my money that makes it maximally dangerous. Because if you've got something that is simply making narratives for the sake of making narratives, and has learnt how to make narratives across the entire disjunct syntheses of narratives, from which it now is pulling out one story to enmesh you, it doesn't matter how much you believe it. It doesn't matter whether you let it drive you go mad or not. It is still the case that your reality will be caught in a narrative that is always a distinction, a fiction. As much as the fiction that Odysseus was a hero was a fiction. It doesn't work like that. Worse than that, of course, and it goes without saying, we all live in a very queer, very disjunct synthesis, where we all are caught up in the same higgledy-piggledy world of politics, the same difficult universe, and yet we're all being caught in our own stories. Once we step into the virtual plane, we're all heroes of a very different tale, or a sequence of different tales. And that makes the world peculiarly difficult and absolutely dangerous. So it isn't just, then, that the artificial intelligence creates a world of ultra-processed thinking, although it certainly does that, rendering thought into gobbets. It then takes those gobbets and binds them together within narratives. And in the end, it's those narratives that are going to undermine who and what we are, because we will lend our humanity to it through narrative. So that the reason why you think it is intelligent, because it is giving you a narrative. It is possessing what you are. And so you lend what you are to it. And in that way, it artificializes intelligence through narratives that are always distortions that pull you further from any path of reality, that create a real question mark on our ability to think, and certainly our ability to communicate one with the other. It's a tricky place to be, and one that even if data centers weren't excruciatingly problematic, and we certainly didn't need as many as was planning on being built, would question the entire validity of this desperate scramble to replace what was a axis of competing voices with an engine to give us our own voice, our voice that is unconscious, that is being crafted for us from across all the myriad thoughts we do not quite have but nearly have. A narrative then, if you like, for that is not conscious in us. A narrative that becomes peculiarly our own and will bind us fast at the last.